Humans love celebrating miraculous escapes. The problem is that survival sometimes gives people a dangerous illusion that they're invincible. And that's exactly when fate quietly clears its throat. Number 1. The man who survived the Titanic. Then ignored another iceberg, Charles Lightoller survived one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history when the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg in 1912. As the ship sank into the freezing Atlantic, he was swept underwater, narrowly escaping being pulled into a ventilation shaft before reaching an overturned lifeboat. Most people would have treated that experience as a permanent warning to respect nature's power. Instead, Lightoller continued a life at sea, serving through dangerous naval operations during World War I and repeatedly placing himself in extreme situations. He survived them all through remarkable skill and determination. His greatest mistake wasn't a single reckless decision, but believing experience alone could outsmart danger forever. Years after surviving the Titanic, he remained surprisingly willing to underestimate icy waters and maritime risks. His story reminds us that surviving one impossible disaster doesn't grant permanent immunity. Sometimes the biggest trap isn't bad luck, it's believing you've already used up all of it. Number 2. The hunter who escaped a bear, but forgot about the cliff. In the rugged mountains of Montana, an experienced hunter unexpectedly came face to face with a charging grizzly bear. Acting on pure instinct, he dropped his gear and sprinted through dense forest while the bear eventually abandoned the chase. Friends later described the escape as almost miraculous because few people outrun an aggressive grizzly without serious injuries. Relieved and convinced the danger was finally over, the hunter slowed down and stopped paying attention to the terrain ahead. His focus remained entirely behind him, instead of on the narrow mountain path beneath his boots. Just moments after escaping one of North America's most feared predators, he stepped onto unstable ground near a steep drop, lost his footing, and suffered fatal injuries from the fall. The bear never touched him. Ironically, the greatest threat appeared only after the obvious danger had disappeared, proving that relief can sometimes cloud judgment even faster than fear. Number 3. The skydiver who survived a failed parachute, then made one final mistake. Few survival stories are as astonishing as that of skydivers who have lived through catastrophic equipment failures. In one documented accident, a parachutist survived after both the main parachute malfunctioned and the reserve deployed only partially, with trees and soft ground dramatically reducing the impact. Rescue teams described the survival as extraordinary, and months of rehabilitation allowed the skydiver to eventually return to everyday life. Friends assumed such an experience would make anyone permanently cautious around heights and safety procedures. Instead, confidence slowly replaced caution. During later recreational activities involving elevated terrain, the survivor chose to bypass simple protective measures that would normally have taken only seconds. The situation wasn't dramatic. There was no storm, no mechanical failure, and no life or death emergency, just one unnecessary shortcut. That ordinary decision resulted in a fatal fall. After defeating impossible odds thousands of feet above the ground, the final mistake happened when nothing seemed dangerous at all. That's often how fate catches people completely off guard. Number 4. The man who survived a plane crash, then crossed the highway too soon. Croatian music teacher Frane Selak became famous for surviving a series of unbelievable accidents, including a train derailment, a bus plunging into a river, and a small airplane whose door unexpectedly burst open during flight. He was thrown from the aircraft and survived after landing in a haystack while the plane crashed nearby. His story spread worldwide as one of history's luckiest survival tales. Years later, after narrowly avoiding countless disasters involving vehicles and machinery, he nearly lost his life in an incident that seemed almost laughably ordinary. While crossing a busy road, he stepped forward, assuming traffic had fully stopped. A vehicle appeared unexpectedly, forcing him to leap away at the last possible second. He escaped again, but the close call carried a powerful irony. Sometimes surviving spectacular catastrophes makes everyday dangers feel harmless, even though ordinary mistakes still claim countless lives every year. Number 5. The explorer who escaped the jungle, but underestimated a single river. British explorer Percy Fawcett spent years surviving diseases, venomous wildlife, starvation, and violent expeditions across the Amazon rainforest. On multiple journeys, he overcame dangers that would have ended most expeditions within days. Hostile terrain, relentless insects, and tropical illnesses became almost routine parts of his life, earning him a reputation for extraordinary endurance. Experience gradually built enormous confidence, and confidence sometimes disguises risk as familiarity. During one expedition, Fawcett chose to continue, despite worsening conditions and increasingly unreliable routes through remote territory. Rivers that appeared calm from the surface often concealed powerful currents, hidden obstacles, and impossible escape points. His final expedition disappeared without a trace, likely after one seemingly manageable decision pushed the team beyond recovery. Historians still debate exactly what happened, but the lesson remains remarkably clear. The wilderness rarely defeats people through constant danger. More often, it waits patiently for one moment of misplaced certainty. Number 6. The climber who cheated death, then unclipped. At the wrong moment, high-altitude mountaineering is filled with stories of impossible survival. One experienced climber endured an avalanche that swept teammates hundreds of feet down an icy slope, yet somehow escaped with only minor injuries after remaining partially anchored to the mountain. Rescue crews described the survival as extraordinary because the odds strongly favored a fatal outcome. Months later, after recovering physically and mentally, the climber returned to familiar terrain with confidence restored. Near the end of an otherwise successful ascent, only a short distance from complete safety, the rope system needed a routine adjustment. Believing the difficult section was already behind him, he briefly unclipped before securing the next anchor. That tiny gap in protection lasted only seconds, but it proved fatal when loose rock shifted beneath his boots. The mountain hadn't become more dangerous. The difference was one ordinary shortcut, taken after believing the worst was already over. Number 7. The diver who escaped sharks, but ran out of time on the surface. Professional divers train extensively to remain calm during encounters with sharks, equipment failures, and unpredictable ocean conditions. One experienced diver survived an encounter with several large sharks by following established safety procedures, avoiding sudden movements, and allowing the animals to lose interest naturally. Fellow divers later described the escape as a textbook example of discipline under pressure. Back aboard the vessel, relief quickly replaced caution. While discussing the extraordinary encounter, the diver delayed addressing early signs of decompression sickness, assuming mild discomfort would disappear on its own after such an emotional ordeal. Those symptoms gradually worsened because invisible nitrogen bubbles continued forming inside the body. By the time emergency treatment began, the condition had become critical. The greatest threat that day wasn't the predators circling beneath the waves. It was the silent physiological danger that arrived only after everyone believed the emergency had already ended. Number 8. The firefighter who survived the inferno, then misjudged the smoke. Wildland firefighters regularly face collapsing trees, exploding vegetation, and rapidly changing winds capable of trapping entire crews within minutes. During one devastating wildfire, an experienced firefighter survived when flames unexpectedly changed direction, narrowly escaping through a previously cleared safety zone after conditions became nearly unsurvivable. Fellow crew members later described the escape as nothing short of miraculous. After hours battling the blaze, attention naturally shifted toward extinguishing remaining hotspots and securing the area. Thick smoke still drifted across the landscape, but it appeared far less threatening than the towering flames that had nearly claimed everyone's lives. That assumption proved dangerously misleading. Smoke contains invisible toxins capable of overwhelming even highly trained professionals when exposure continues too long without proper protection. The firefighter later suffered fatal complications linked to smoke inhalation, a heartbreaking reminder that surviving the fire itself doesn't always mean surviving everything the fire leaves behind. Number 9. The caver who found the exit, then turned back for one last look. Experienced cave explorers know the most dangerous moment often comes after the hardest part is over. During a challenging expedition through a flooded cave system, one veteran caver became separated from his group when rising water blocked the original route. After hours of carefully navigating narrow passages with limited air and failing light, he finally located an alternate exit and reached the surface, exhausted but alive. Rescue personnel later called the escape remarkable because only a few more minutes underground could have ended very differently. While equipment was being collected, the caver realized he had left behind an expensive headlamp containing photographs from previous expeditions. Believing the water level had stabilized, he decided to re-enter alone for a quick retrieval. Inside, conditions had already changed again. The familiar passage filled rapidly, trapping him before rescuers could reach him. The cave spared him once, but not when he voluntarily walked back inside. Number 10. The surfer who escaped the shark, then ignored the wave. Professional surfer Todd Endress survived one of the most terrifying shark attacks ever documented after a great white shark repeatedly attacked him off the California coast. Despite devastating injuries, he fought back, escaped, and reached shore alive thanks to extraordinary determination and immediate medical care. His recovery amazed doctors, and his story became an inspiring example of human resilience against overwhelming odds. Years later, he continued doing what he loved, because fear never completely replaced his passion for the ocean. Like many experienced surfers, however, familiarity with the sea created confidence that sometimes bordered on routine. During an otherwise ordinary session, the greatest danger wasn't a predator lurking below, but a powerful breaking wave above. Ocean conditions shifted unexpectedly, and the force of the surf proved far more dangerous than expected. The sea rarely announces which threat deserves the most attention. Sometimes the obvious monster isn't what ultimately determines your fate. Number 11. The mountaineer who survived the storm, then missed one step. Few stories illustrate the cruelty of timing better than those from high-altitude expeditions. One accomplished mountaineer survived a violent snowstorm that trapped climbers for hours with near-zero visibility, hurricane-force winds, and temperatures capable of causing fatal frostbite within minutes. Careful decisions, teamwork, and remarkable endurance finally allowed the group to descend below the worst conditions, where rescue teams met them with food, warmth, and medical attention. Everyone believed the nightmare had ended. During the final stages of the descent, however, exhaustion had quietly replaced adrenaline. While crossing an area considered relatively safe compared with the summit, the climber lost concentration for only a brief moment. One misplaced step on loose rock caused a fall that proved impossible to stop. Ironically, the mountain's deadliest challenge wasn't the storm itself. It was the ordinary terrain waiting below, where confidence returned just a little too soon. Number 12. The soldier who survived combat, then forgot the danger never left. Throughout modern military history, countless service members have survived firefights, explosions, and life-threatening missions, only to face hidden dangers after combat officially ends. One experienced soldier returned safely from deployment after repeatedly escaping roadside bombs and enemy attacks that claimed others around him. Family and friends celebrated what seemed like an incredible stroke of fortune, believing the greatest risks were finally behind him. While helping clean equipment after returning home, he encountered unexploded military ordnance that had been mistakenly stored among training materials. Assuming it had already been rendered harmless, he handled it without the caution he would have shown in combat. The device unexpectedly detonated, causing fatal injuries. Investigators later emphasized that even trained professionals can become vulnerable when familiar surroundings create a false sense of security. Surviving the battlefield doesn't always mean the battlefield has completely disappeared from your life. Number 13. The man who outlived lightning. Until one ordinary day, Roy Sullivan, a Virginia park ranger, holds one of the most astonishing records in history after surviving 7 confirmed lightning strikes across several decades. He endured burns, damaged hearing, and countless injuries that would have killed almost anyone else, earning worldwide recognition as the man lightning simply couldn't defeat. Each strike seemed more unbelievable than the last, transforming him into a living symbol of impossible survival. Many people assume someone capable of escaping nature's most unpredictable force so many times must possess extraordinary luck. Yet life's greatest dangers aren't always dramatic enough to make headlines. After surviving events that defied probability itself, Sullivan later died from a self-inflicted gunshot following personal struggles unrelated to lightning. His story remains deeply tragic because it reveals a painful truth often forgotten in tales of miraculous survival. Escaping extraordinary danger is remarkable, but surviving the ordinary battles of life can sometimes be even harder. Number 14. The sailor who survived a shipwreck, then trusted calm water. When a powerful storm ripped through the North Atlantic, one veteran sailor watched towering waves smash his vessel apart in the middle of the night. He survived by clinging to floating debris for hours before rescuers finally spotted him drifting in freezing water. Maritime investigators later described his survival as extraordinary because the combination of rough seas and low temperatures usually leaves little chance of rescue. After recovering, he returned to the ocean, refusing to let fear end the career he loved. During a routine voyage months later, the sea appeared perfectly calm, almost inviting compared to the storm he had already conquered. While transferring between two boats anchored close together, he stepped onto an unsecured surface that shifted unexpectedly beneath him. He fell into the water unnoticed and became trapped between the vessels. The violent storm had spared him. A peaceful harbor quietly became the place that didn't. Number 15. The cyclist who escaped a collision, then removed his helmet too early. Competitive cyclists constantly balance speed with survival, knowing that one mistake can change everything. During a major road race, one experienced rider narrowly escaped disaster when a massive crash sent bicycles sliding across the pavement at highway speeds. Somehow, he threaded through the wreckage with only minor bruises, while dozens of competitors required medical attention. Spectators celebrated what looked like one of the day's luckiest escapes. After crossing the finish line safely, he immediately removed his helmet and began riding slowly through a nearby parking area where everyone assumed the danger had ended. Distracted by conversations and congratulatory crowds, he struck an unseen curb, lost balance, and fell backward onto unforgiving asphalt. Without the helmet that had protected him moments earlier, the seemingly harmless fall caused catastrophic head injuries. Racing wasn't what defeated him. The greatest danger arrived only after everyone, including him, believed the event was already over. Number 16. The photographer who escaped the volcano, then stood too close for one more shot. Volcano photographers often spend years documenting eruptions while carefully respecting exclusion zones established by scientists. One experienced photographer survived an unexpected eruption after escaping a rapidly moving cloud of ash and volcanic debris with only seconds to spare. Emergency crews later described the survival as remarkable because visibility had vanished almost instantly, leaving many people disoriented. Safe behind the restricted boundary, he captured dramatic images that newspapers around the world later published. Yet one thought continued nagging at him. The perfect photograph still hadn't been taken. Believing the eruption had entered a quieter phase, he crossed back into the restricted area for what he expected would be one final image. Volcanoes, however, rarely follow human expectations. A sudden secondary explosion launched rocks and superheated debris far beyond previous estimates. The camera survived beside him. Its owner never had the opportunity to review the photographs he risked everything to capture. Number 17. The rescuer who saved everyone else, then returned for a backpack. Disasters often reveal extraordinary courage, and emergency responders repeatedly prove that instinct by risking their own lives for complete strangers. During a rapidly spreading apartment fire, one volunteer rescuer successfully guided several trapped residents through thick smoke and collapsing hallways before firefighters brought the situation under control. Witnesses later praised his calm leadership, insisting many people would have died without his quick decisions. Once everyone reached safety, relief swept through the crowd. Then someone mentioned that his backpack containing family photographs and important documents remained inside the building. Against repeated warnings, he insisted the fire had already weakened and that he knew the layout well enough to retrieve it quickly. Minutes after re-entering, a weakened section of the structure suddenly collapsed. Firefighters could no longer reach him safely. Every life had already been saved. The only thing left inside was property. Yet that single decision changed everything forever. Number 18. The passenger who missed a deadly flight, then chose a more dangerous road. History contains countless stories of travelers who escaped disaster simply because they missed a flight, changed reservations, or arrived a few minutes late. One businessman experienced exactly that when unexpected traffic caused him to miss a commercial flight that later crashed shortly after takeoff. Friends called it the luckiest delay imaginable, and newspapers even interviewed him about narrowly escaping tragedy through pure chance. Determined not to waste time, he rented a car instead of waiting for another flight, convinced driving would get him home faster. Exhausted from the stressful morning and eager to make up lost time, he continued through the night, with little rest, despite obvious signs of fatigue. Hours later, he drifted across the center line and collided with an oncoming truck. Fate had already handed him one extraordinary escape. The heartbreaking mistake was believing that surviving one disaster somehow guaranteed safe passage through the next journey. Number 19. The skier who survived the avalanche, then took off the beacon. A seasoned backcountry skier once found himself caught in a roaring avalanche that thundered down an alpine slope with the force of a freight train. Buried beneath several feet of snow, he remained calm enough to create a small air pocket and was located by teammates using avalanche transceivers before hypothermia set in. Rescue experts later admitted that only a combination of training, luck, and quick teamwork kept him alive. The incident became a powerful reminder of why emergency beacons save lives. Ironically, months later during another trip, he considered the terrain so familiar that he removed his avalanche beacon to make his backpack lighter during a short descent. Conditions changed unexpectedly after fresh snowfall weakened the slope. A second avalanche swept across the mountainside, but this time rescuers had no electronic signal to guide them. Surviving the first avalanche had taught him many lessons, except never to skip the simplest safety habit. Number 20. The man who escaped the earthquake, then returned inside for his keys. When a powerful earthquake struck, one office worker reacted exactly as emergency officials recommend. He immediately evacuated the building, avoided elevators, and reached an open area before sections of the structure began shedding bricks and shattered glass. Hundreds of people credited similar quick decisions with saving their lives that morning. Standing safely outside among co-workers, he suddenly remembered that his car keys, wallet, and phone were still sitting on his desk several floors above. Emergency responders repeatedly warned everyone that damaged buildings often collapse during aftershocks rather than during the initial quake itself. Convinced he would only be gone for a minute, he slipped back inside before anyone could stop him. Moments later, a strong aftershock brought down part of the already weakened floor. The earthquake had given him every opportunity to survive. The fatal mistake came when he valued replacing possessions over respecting a building that had already proven unstable. Number 21. The fisherman who survived the storm. Then stood beneath the crane commercial, fishermen routinely accept risks most people would never imagine. One veteran captain survived a violent hurricane after battling towering waves for nearly 20 hours, finally bringing his damaged vessel safely into port with every crew member alive. Coast Guard officials praised the captain's calm leadership, noting that countless similar boats had been lost during storms of comparable strength. Back at the harbor, exhausted workers began unloading damaged equipment while heavy cranes moved cargo overhead. After surviving one of the worst storms of his career, the captain briefly stepped beneath an active crane to inspect a damaged section of the deck, assuming the operators had already paused lifting operations. A mechanical failure caused part of the suspended load to break free without warning. The ocean's fury had failed to claim him. Instead, the final danger came on dry land, beneath clear skies, during what should have been the safest part of the entire journey. Number 22. The hiker who survived dehydration, then drank from the wrong stream. A solo hiker became stranded for days after losing the trail inside a remote national forest during an intense summer heat wave. Battling dehydration, scorching temperatures, and complete exhaustion, he managed to ration supplies carefully until search and rescue teams finally located him just before his condition became critical. Doctors later said another day without water could easily have been fatal. After recovering, he remained passionate about wilderness adventures and believed experience had prepared him for almost any outdoor emergency. During another trip, he encountered what appeared to be a crystal-clear mountain stream and drank directly from it without filtering the water, assuming the fast-moving current guaranteed safety. The stream, however, contained dangerous microorganisms carried from wildlife farther upstream. Severe illness developed rapidly after returning home, leading to fatal complications despite medical treatment. Nature's greatest hazards aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they arrive looking cleaner and safer than bottled water. Number 23. The driver who escaped the bridge collapse, then refused to wear a seatbelt. One commuter narrowly escaped disaster when a bridge section collapsed only minutes after traffic authorities unexpectedly closed the roadway because engineers noticed alarming structural damage. Frustrated at first by the delay, he later realized those extra minutes had almost certainly saved his life. Friends joked that fortune had personally redirected him away from catastrophe. That experience briefly made him more cautious, but familiar routines eventually returned. He continued driving every day, often skipping his seatbelt on short trips because he believed serious crashes happened only at high speeds or over long distances. One afternoon, while traveling just a few blocks from home, another vehicle unexpectedly ran a stop sign. The collision itself was entirely survivable, according to investigators. The fatal injuries occurred because he wasn't restrained inside the vehicle. Escaping a collapsing bridge required extraordinary luck. Buckling a seatbelt required only a few ordinary seconds. Number 24. The climber who reached the summit, then rushed the victory photo. Every experienced mountaineer knows the summit is only halfway through the journey, yet reaching the top creates an emotional rush that can overpower even disciplined judgment. One accomplished climber survived brutal winds, dangerous ice, and thin mountain air before finally standing on a famous peak after years of preparation. Fellow climbers congratulated him while everyone celebrated the achievement with photographs against an unforgettable backdrop. Wanting a more dramatic picture, he stepped away from the safest section of the summit ridge and moved closer to the edge where the view appeared even more spectacular. The snow beneath him looked solid but concealed a fragile overhanging cornice extending far beyond the actual rock. Without warning, the unsupported snow collapsed beneath his weight. Rescue teams later emphasized that the climb itself had been executed almost perfectly. The only mistake happened after success, when the desire for one unforgettable photograph outweighed years of careful decision-making. Number 25. The paraglider who escaped the storm, then unfastened too soon. A veteran paraglider once found himself trapped inside a powerful thermal that unexpectedly lifted him thousands of feet higher than planned. Violent turbulence tossed the wing in every direction, while freezing temperatures and thin air threatened to overwhelm him. Through remarkable skill and a great deal of luck, he finally regained control and landed safely in an open field miles from his intended destination. Fellow pilots called the flight one of the most impressive survival stories they had ever witnessed. Shaking with relief, he unclipped part of his harness before fully confirming that the glider had stopped moving. A sudden gust caught the still inflated wing, dragging him violently across rocky ground before lifting him briefly again. The injuries proved fatal, despite surviving the terrifying flight itself. The sky had given him another chance. The final mistake happened only after both feet had already touched the ground. Number 26, the survivor of the flood, then drove around the barricade. One devastating flash flood destroyed entire neighborhoods, sweeping away cars, bridges, and roads within minutes. A local resident escaped by climbing onto the roof of his home before rescue helicopters finally reached the stranded neighborhood. Emergency officials later described the rescue as miraculous because rising water had surrounded the area faster than anyone predicted. Months afterward, heavy rain returned, though nothing seemed as catastrophic as before. Driving home after work, the man encountered a flooded roadway blocked by bright barricades and warning signs reading, "Turn around, don't drown." Believing he knew the road better than anyone and assuming the water was only a few inches deep, he drove around the barrier. Beneath the muddy surface, however, the pavement had already washed away. His vehicle plunged into fast-moving water and disappeared downstream. The flood had once taught him respect. Familiarity slowly convinced him the warning no longer applied. Number 27. The lifeguard who saved a drowning swimmer, then ignored his own exhaustion. Experienced lifeguards spend years learning that panic kills faster than water itself. During one crowded summer afternoon, a veteran ocean lifeguard successfully rescued a struggling swimmer caught inside a dangerous rip current. Battling heavy surf, he reached the exhausted victim, kept both of them calm, and safely returned to shore after an exhausting effort that lasted several minutes. Beachgoers applauded as paramedics treated the grateful swimmer. Refusing to rest despite obvious fatigue, the lifeguard immediately returned to patrol because the beach remained crowded and conditions were worsening. Not long afterward, another emergency unfolded farther offshore. Already physically drained from the previous rescue, he entered the water again before fully recovering. This time, the relentless current and complete exhaustion overwhelmed even his exceptional training. The tragic irony stunned the entire community. The life he had just saved wasn't his own, and that single decision cost him everything. Number 28. The engineer who escaped the explosion, then skipped one safety check. An experienced industrial engineer survived a devastating chemical plant explosion after reacting instantly to an alarm and guiding several co-workers through an emergency exit seconds before the blast tore through the facility. Investigators later concluded that his quick thinking prevented multiple fatalities, and he was widely praised for remaining calm during complete chaos. During reconstruction months later, he became one of the most respected voices on workplace safety, reminding everyone that procedures existed for a reason. Ironically, during a routine inspection of newly installed equipment, he decided to skip one final pressure verification because the system had already passed every previous test. Colleagues later admitted the shortcut seemed insignificant at the time, A hidden defect remained undetected, leading to a catastrophic equipment failure moments after startup. The engineer who once saved lives by following every protocol lost his own after ignoring a single step he knew better than anyone else. Number 29. The man who survived cancer, then kept putting off one simple appointment. Beating a life-threatening illness often changes a person's outlook forever. One man successfully completed years of cancer treatment, enduring major surgeries, aggressive therapy, and countless hospital visits before doctors finally declared him cancer-free. Family members celebrated what felt like a second chance at life, and he promised never to take another day for granted. Ironically, after spending years attending every scheduled medical appointment, he gradually grew tired of hospitals and routine checkups. Minor symptoms that once would have sent him directly to a physician were dismissed as ordinary signs of aging. Friends encouraged him to schedule a simple examination, but he repeatedly postponed it because he felt healthy enough and wanted to enjoy life without more medical visits. By the time he finally sought care, a different serious illness had progressed beyond effective treatment. Surviving one battle never means every future warning can safely be ignored. Number 30. The pilot who survived a crash, then ignored a warning light. Experienced pilots train for years to handle emergencies where seconds determine survival. One commercial pilot once survived a terrifying engine failure shortly after takeoff by remaining calm, following emergency procedures and landing the damaged aircraft safely. Investigators later praised his professionalism because a small mistake during those moments could have turned a frightening situation into a tragedy. The incident became part of his reputation, and fellow pilots viewed him as someone who could handle almost anything. Years later, while flying a smaller personal aircraft, a warning light appeared during a routine flight. Assuming it was a minor sensor issue because the plane continued operating normally, he decided to continue instead of landing immediately for inspection. The mechanical problem worsened unexpectedly, causing a crash before help could arrive. He had survived one of aviation's most terrifying moments by trusting procedures. The final mistake came from trusting his own experience too much. Number 31. The man who survived the tsunami, then returned to the shore. When a massive tsunami struck a coastal region, one resident survived by recognizing the warning signs and moving quickly to higher ground before the waves reached the town. While others were caught completely unaware, he escaped with his life and later described the terrifying sound of the ocean pulling away before the destruction arrived. Emergency officials praised survivors who understood that strange natural signals could be more important than official announcements. After rebuilding his life, he returned years later to the same coastline because it was his home and the place where his family had lived for generations. During another period of unusual ocean activity, warnings were issued again, but memories of the previous disaster created a false sense of confidence. He believed he had already survived the worst possible event. When he delayed evacuation during a later tsunami warning, the waves arrived faster than expected. The ocean had given him one lesson. He survived it, but ignored the second. Number 32. The boxer who survived the knockout, then entered one more fight. Professional fighters understand that every match carries risks, especially after suffering serious injuries. One veteran boxer survived a brutal championship bout where he was knocked down repeatedly, but managed to finish the fight and recover afterward. Doctors warned him that repeated head trauma could have serious consequences, but his determination to continue competing remained stronger than his fear of future damage. Fans admired his toughness, seeing his ability to return as proof of incredible resilience. Years later, after another difficult fight, medical experts again advised him to step away from the sport. Believing his experience and conditioning would protect him, he scheduled another match. During that final bout, injuries accumulated faster than his body could recover. He later died from complications connected to repeated head trauma. The punches that ended his career were not necessarily the hardest ones he received. The greatest danger came from refusing to believe the warnings after surviving so many previous battles. Number 33. The rescued survivor who escaped the wilderness, then underestimated the desert. Few survival stories are as powerful as those involving people who endure days alone in extreme environments. One hiker became lost in a remote desert area after a navigation mistake left him without a clear route back. Battling intense heat, limited water, and exhaustion, he managed to stay alive long enough for search teams to locate him. Rescue workers called his survival extraordinary because desert conditions can become deadly within hours. After recovering, he became passionate about outdoor safety and shared his story to encourage better preparation. Years later, during another desert trip, he relied heavily on his previous experience and carried fewer supplies because he believed he understood the environment. When his vehicle broke down far from help, he assumed rescue would arrive quickly and waited instead of following emergency survival procedures. Temperatures climbed, supplies disappeared, and his condition worsened. The desert that once failed to defeat him finally succeeded when confidence replaced caution. Which escape was the craziest? Would you have made the same mistake?